Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is, I was so excited to live alone, until construction started on my building, and now I'm trapped. By Blemish. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street, and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. After several failed attempts at guessing the password, it finally connected. It was hard to type all this out, but I need help, and this really seems like the only avenue. I was able to connect to a few other social media sites at first, but they all became blacklisted before I could send a message. I need someone to help me before they realize I've logged on and turn off the internet completely. I don't even know where to start. When I first moved into my apartment, I was so excited to finally get a place all to myself. I've never lived alone. I lived with my parents, and then I went to the dorms at school, and then from roommate to roommate after that. This was the first time I would have a space that would be 100% my own. I could decorate however I wanted, and I could leave the kitchen as a mess if I wanted. I was the only one who would have to deal with the mess. The place itself wasn't too special. It was a studio, but I didn't care because it was all mine. It was an older building, and I noticed the first week I was there that it was quite drafty. The neighbors didn't bother me, though I could hear footsteps and doors slamming at all hours of the night. Lucky for me, I was not a light sleeper, so I only noticed when I was already staying up late. The hot water was short-lived in the shower, but I got into a groove within the first few days and figured out just when to get out to avoid the sudden cold water that would hit after a few minutes. One of my favorite things about the new apartment was the wall and windows. My apartment building was built on a hill, so my unit was slightly underground, and the ground outside was level with the windowsills. It made a perfect spot for people watching. For the first couple of weeks, I would wake up early, make some coffee, and sit watching the street. Things felt really calm and safe there, and I really enjoyed watching people walk their dogs or go for a family walk. Then construction started out front. I was super annoyed because the building manager never mentioned it when I was touring. They were doing extensive construction too. They tore up the whole sidewalk and even the little flower beds that lined the building. Eventually, they erected a bunch of scaffolding over the entire front of the building and sidewalk. It was completely closed in and was covered in dozens of copies of the same poster. They all said, "Coming soon." There was nothing about what was coming soon though. Eventually, I got curious enough to ask the building manager what the deal was with the construction. I mean, I had to go out the back of the building to get in and out of my apartment every day. It was a real hassle, and there was nothing giving me an idea of how long the construction would be going for. I couldn't even see out the windows at all anymore because the closed-in scaffolding completely blocked them. I would open the blinds to see "coming soon" on the inside wall of the scaffolding. That struck me as odd, because why would they advertise to just me and the other tenants, who were the only ones who could possibly see these posters? So, like I said, I reached out to the building manager. She didn't answer any of my calls. I sent her an email asking her what they were constructing and how long it would take. She replied within an hour and said it was just some light construction and that it would be done by the end of the week. At this point, it had already been 2 weeks, which seemed a bit more than light construction. But I figured it was almost done then, no big deal. Then Friday came. Friday morning, I woke up to find all my windows had been replaced entirely, like right out of the wall. How they did it without waking me, I will never know. But I'll be damned if instead of windows, I was suddenly seeing mirrors over the entire wall that faced the street. They went from floor to ceiling, and had no blinds anymore. I was pissed. I rolled out of bed, grabbed some pants and a shirt, and went to my front door to go outside and check out what had been put in front of the building. Unfortunately for me, there was no front door. The whole wall was just that, a wall. At this point, I was at a loss. I kept pacing back and forth from my bedroom to where my front door had been before. Nothing changed. I was still faced with a wall of mirrors and a solid wall. I couldn't leave my apartment, so I called my building manager several times and texted her. Nothing, no response at all. I went back and emailed her and told her I was now trapped and she needed to come down and figure out how to let me out and fix this bullshit. She replied again within an hour and said that was odd and that she'd contact the construction company for me. She apologized that I was not happy with this situation. After an hour, I started to think, screw this, and figured if they were going to have to fix my wall and mirrors anyway, then I should be able to break my way out. So, I started taking items in my apartment and slamming them against the mirrors. I took a chair, a large pot, my own fist. Nothing I did worked. The mirror stood there as solid as it was before. I called the police. I called 911. I called several friends and even my boss at work because no matter how many calls I made, no one answered. The phone just rang and rang and rang. I emailed, I texted, I went on social media. No one replied. Not even so much as a read receipt. The only person I could get to reply was the building manager, but all she kept saying was, "That's odd," and telling me she would follow up on the construction company. After several hours of panic, I heard shuffling from out in where I assume was still the hallway. A loud beep could be heard in my kitchen, which shared that wall with the hallway. I walked in to see the fridge had been replaced. I hadn't even noticed. Had it been that way when I woke up? I couldn't remember. I opened the fridge to find it much more well stocked than I had left it. Did they give me food? I ate what I could and continued to think of ways out of this place. Nothing was really coming to me. I kept going back to the old solutions. I called so many times, and the results were always the same. Not one person replied. I tried new combinations of things to throw at the mirrors on the wall, and they stayed just as intact as before. This went on for hours and hours, and at one point, between my 50th and 51st social media message, that my feed wasn't updating. It had all the same posts that I had cycled through all morning. I checked the internet on my phone and realized that I had no cell service, but I was connected to Wi-Fi. I could not for the life of me figure out what was going on, but the only response I would get is the same canned message from my building manager's office. This went on for hours, and eventually I started taking naps to pass the time. At one point, I woke up from one nap, checked my phone, saw no change, and rolled back over to go to sleep. It took several days before I realized I was no longer sure whether the time on the clock or on my phone was AM or PM. Did my phone used to say AM or PM? I can't remember, but it didn't now. It's scary how quickly you lose track of time when you have no access to looking outside and can't leave. I can't say for sure how many days it had been. At this point, I guessed based on how often the fridge would be restocked. Seemed that they refilled the fridge every 3 days or so. It was always the same food. It had to be about 6 days or so because they refilled the fridge twice. When I woke up to a large box in the living room, how in the world had it gotten there? How did it get there without me hearing whoever dropped it off? I opened it at once, and inside was a card. It stated, "Enrichment Kit." There were a few model airplanes, an old favorite hobby of mine, a deck of cards, some crafting supplies, 3 books, 2 fiction and 1 history, and a ukulele with a laminated practice cord sheet. I lost it. I started banging on the mirrors like no tomorrow. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I screamed until my throat was on fire with how sore it had become. It suddenly became very clear that someone was doing this on purpose. Look, the thought had crossed my mind at this point, somewhere on the first day actually, and every time the fridge was stocked all over again. Clearly, I was here on purpose, but this box confirmed that I was not going to be getting out anytime soon. It was sometime on day 12 or 13 that something shifted. At this point, I've been marking the days by scratching them into the wall next to the fridge. I had gotten a steady routine down. I'd wake up, do some banging on the wall and mirrors. At this point, I'd taken a break to read the history book again. Then I'd spend some time trying to refresh my feeds on my phone, to no avail. They still showed the same post I'd seen days prior. Well, on day 12 or 13, still hard to say for sure, I decided to check my Wi-Fi connection again. It was the same as ever, connected to my home Wi-Fi hotspot. I hadn't had a chance to change its name from the generic string of numbers and letters. Instinctively, I clicked on my hotspot name. That's when, for the first time, I saw other Wi-Fi networks. I can't believe I hadn't thought of checking this before. The list was short though. There was only one option beside my own home Wi-Fi to choose. I couldn't connect to it no matter how many times I clicked on it. At first, I thought the name was a joke. I read the name several times before really thinking about what it said. When I did finally realize it, I lost it all over again. I bloodied my knuckles, pounding on the mirrors. Then I kicked until my toenails cracked and my feet were swollen and bloody. Wincing from the pain in my hands, I picked up my phone and looked once more at the Wi-Fi hotspot name. It said, Human Exhibit Guest, Wi-Fi. As I mentioned earlier, it was at this point I was able to select the Wi-Fi hotspot, and it asked for a password. It took so many tries, but eventually I guessed correctly. It was preservation. I was able to navigate to a few social media sites. One of my friends had just posted a link to a website asking if anyone else had seen this and had anyone heard from me in the last few weeks. I'd never heard of that site before this moment. When I clicked on it, I saw my own apartment on live stream. I watched as I stood and walked around my apartment, and the me in the live stream moved at the same time. I started typing a message asking for help before the connection broke and the web browser said that the site was blocked. I tried several other sites and all had the same result. As soon as I tried typing a message to someone, the connection broke. So I typed this message in my notes so I could post it quickly on this site, which is the last one I'm still able to get to on this Wi-Fi. Someone please help me. I don't know what sick person made an exhibit out of my home, but it's not right. I need to be let out. If you are out there, please reply. Don't leave me locked in here like this. Can anyone help?